А мы приглашаем следующего спикера, это Кристофер Бридлав, который является программным менеджером фестиваля Burning Man. Воу! Да, я знаю, Burning Man — это мечта всех, наверное, посетителей флакона и не только. Кто был на Burning Man? Поднимите руку. 2 человека были. А кто собирается в ближайшем году? Почти все собираются. Сейчас узнаем, стоит ли ехать. Кристофер про коллаборации расскажет, кстати, нам. Okay, Christopher, you are welcome.
Thank you. Hi there. So what I'm going to talk about today is Black Rock City, which is the place where we have the Burning Man event, and kind of give some ideas about how that creates crowdsourced innovation. So real quick, my name is Kристофер Бридлав. I work with the Burning Man organization. And what I do with them is I actually run an organization within it called Burners Without Borders, which is about work out in the world, which isn't really what I'm going to talk about today, but if you want to look it up, there it is. So, Burning Man, like this means many things to many people. I think some people would argue that it is one of the most successful brands in the world right now. Other people would argue that it isn't even a brand itself, that it's an anti-brand. I get to talk about Burning Man a lot during my job, and so oftentimes I have to talk about what Burning Man is and what Burning Man isn't. You know, a lot of people would say that Burning Man is a massive party, which of course there are many parties at Burning Man 24/7, 7 days a week. But, you know, there are nightclubs all over doing all different types of music, all of this, but that's not really what Burning Man is. It's just a part of it. Some people ask me all the time, is Burning Man a bunch of hippies? Which, you know, looking at some of the photos, it could be. There's a lot of new age stuff going on, there's a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, but that's not really what Burning Man is either. To me, Burning Man is a mixture of a couple of things. One, it is an unforgiving desert. So the temperatures get up over 100 degrees during the day, and they can go down to 0 at night sometimes. Also, there are these massive dust storms, which can white out for hours, and actually this is a big part of how we design things at Burning Man. You can see a photo of someone here who didn't bring their protective gear, which is pretty important. And this is me hiding out in my truck. One thing that's nice about the dust is you get to see what you look like when you'll be old. Burning Man is an art festival. I think this is how many people hear about Burning Man. A lot of the art is very iconic. We allow people to build things that you could not build anywhere else, and also do things like burn these massive structures, which I don't think you could do anywhere else either. You can also build things that are dangerous. You can also build things that people can climb on. And so this allows people to create very experimental things that they wouldn't be able to do. Burning Man is also a testing ground for new ideas. A lot of people come to Burning Man to prototype things. For example, this is a structure that came out of Shanghai, China. This hadn't been built anywhere else in the world. One of the problems is you need a lot of permits and things to build things elsewhere in the world, but at Burning Man, as long as you can show us it's safe and you have an engineering structure, we'll let you try it out there. We also get to try out a bunch of new technologies. Because we're trying to figure out how to make people live in the desert, we're always having to figure out new ways to power, food, water, things like this. For some people too, Burning Man is a spiritual experience. This is a picture of the temple in 2011. You know, I don't know how it is here, but in America, much of the creative and art scene is very removed from religion. But religion actually has some very useful functions for us. So we build a spiritual place in the city, and this is a place where people can come and be calm. It is where you can let go of people who've died or have left you. It's a very interesting experience. Whoop, woo, all right. So to me, Burning Man is very much an actual city. When we build Burning Man, it only exists for 1 week a year, but it is the 4th largest city in the state of Nevada. It's 80,000 people here. And actually, the city has many things that you'd actually see in a regular city. So we have things like a post office. You can receive mail at Burning Man to your address, and you can send mail from Burning Man as well. We also have things like an airport. We charter planes from 4 different cities in America and run our own airport with the Federal Aviation System. You can see here Burning Man layered over San Francisco, which is about 7 square miles. It's a pretty big city. It's actually very hard to get around. So we also have to do things like have our own public transportation system. Of course, it doesn't look like your public transportation system anywhere else. Burning Man is also one of the largest volunteer events in the world, and this is actually super important to what Burning Man is. We have over 2,000 volunteers who help us build this city. Burning Man, in essence, is a huge collaborative effort to build all of these things. Burning Man wouldn't be possible if we paid everyone who actually helped us build this city. And because it's done by volunteers, it allows for a lot more creativity and a lot more flexibility in how people work in roles. But to me, again, maybe most importantly, Burning Man is a blank slate. This is what the desert looks like before we come, and this is what it looks like when we're done. So every year, we get to start over and try something new. And so really, how does it work? Burning Man is a huge experiment in human-centered design thinking. And it's kind of an accident, actually. Like, we didn't try to do this, but the cyclical nature of the building, the burning, and then the tearing down allows us to redo our systems every single year. So there's a few reasons why we did that. One is historical. In 1986 is when Burning Man started on a beach. 20 people showed up for that event. It was never going to be a thing, and then somehow it turned into something that was huge. So you can see our population numbers rise over the years. Now we're at 80,000 people. And so each year as we were doing this experiment, when we went from 20 to hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands, we had to figure out certain systems. One of those things is city zoning. So in 1992, we started to figure out that we wanted the city to start to look like a circle. In 1997, we started to create radial roads so that we could have addresses. By 1998, it's starting to look like the city we have today, where we were building in civic plazas for resource distribution. And this is what it looks like today, an actual city with zoning, with neighborhoods, and with infrastructure throughout it. So out on the outer ridge, this is where we have our big sound camps, blasting noise out into nature so that people can sleep. Down in the middle of the city, we have a quiet zone for families, and then these circles are city plazas where you can find things like medical, ICE, and police, and things like this. So also, Burning Man started to scale around the globe. Right now, we have 86 other events that are happening, and you'll see that people are iterating on our city structure there as well. So this is Africa Burn, which is in South Africa. It's the second largest event, and it's 13,000 people. You can see they're using an iteration of the model. It's circular. They have city plazas, but they're doing their own thing. And this is very much in the spirit of Burning Man, where we'd like you to try what we're doing, but then try it yourself, because you might learn something that we haven't learned yet, and maybe we can learn from our friends in Africa. There's also survival reasons. There's a lot of innovation happening at Burning Man. So you have to figure out how to live there. Very early on, people started to use yurts from Mongolia because they knew these were good systems for the desert. But there's a lot of problems with them in the case that they're not really good for super hot environments. So a few years later, an Iranian architect built these, which are called hexayurts. We build these out of foam. They're about 2 inches thick. So it's the same structure, it's a lot of space, it flat packs, and it's great for the environment. It keeps you cool during the day and warm at night. But there's some problems with them. They're very light, they blow away, they're hard to pack up. So a few years later, our friend built this, which is called the shift pod. The shift pod pops up in about 2 minutes. And so again, using the same structure, using a very similar material, but all of a sudden iterating on the model. And what's cool about the shift pod is now it's being used in disaster zones and refugee zones around the world. So you can see them being used here after the Mexico earthquake last year. One of the things that creates innovation at Burning Man, too, is the ability to scale quickly. So this is my friend Greg Fleischman. He's a really amazing designer. He was doing a bunch of CNC furniture. He had a show in LA, and my 2 other friends came up to him and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about building something for Burning Man?" He decided to come the next year, and he built a playground for kids. He came again the next year, and he built this playground for adults. He came 2 years later and was able to build this massive structure that could fit almost 1,000 people under it. Now this structure has absolutely no metal fasteners, no screws, no bolts, no nails. It's all lock fit. And so it's a really interesting experiment in seeing how someone can take something from furniture into a giant building in about 4 years. So why does this all work? For me, I think what we don't do is maybe the most important thing about Burning Man. We don't predict what you want. We don't think we know. So that means that nothing is for sale. We don't know what you want. You got to bring it. We don't build any stages. We don't know what you want. Again, you have to build it. We don't book any performers. If you want to perform, you have to bring your performer or you have to come yourself. We expect you to be responsible for your own safety. That's one of the reasons we can do big and crazy things at Burning Man, is because that safety and responsibility is on the onus of every single person. It's not our job. And everything is possible, but you have to do it. That's the other thing we do, is we don't tell you what to do. So if you want to bring a cello and do performances out in the middle of the desert, you can. If you and all of your friends want to dress up like bunny rabbits and have a parade around the city, you can. And if you want to build a giant flaming octopus that drives around the desert, you can also do this. And it's one of the only places in the world where you can probably get away with it. So to me, this is one of the main phrases that really kind of phrases why Burning Man works. I don't know if you guys know, if this is from a movie, if you build it, they will come. But if they build it, they'll stay forever. And I think this is one of the main reasons that Burning Man continues to be so popular around the world, is that we're giving people this ultimate responsibility to do what they dream about. Okay, so, but who cares what you do in the desert? Like, why does this even matter to the larger world? Now, there are a bunch of examples that I could give you. But to me, Burning Man is kind of a representation of the internet in a lot of ways. You have all these people out here, they're doing their own things, and year after year, everyone is connecting together. And so you're creating a giant mycelium network of creatives. This means people are bringing art out into the world. You saw that Gothic ray ship before. It got installed in San Francisco and is now permanently at a museum in Colorado. There it is. This is our temple builder, David Best. He built this in Derry, Ireland. He's starting to use his temples as community projects now. So this town in Ireland has always had a huge fight between the Catholics and the Protestants. And so he built this, this structure on the hill where they traditionally would burn effigies of the political leaders. And so instead of having this be a political thing, he built something beautiful. He had the city come out. It ended up being one of the most popular projects that had ever happened. And they actually decided to like rename the town after this. They had like 2 different names for the town, and now they actually created one name for the town, which is an interesting thing to do with art. Okay. So, you know, we also have people who are doing Burning Man events in very interesting places. This is an event called Catharsis on the Mall, which is in front of the Washington Monument. This would be like doing a Burning Man event by the Kremlin in the Red Square. They're actually able to burn this, and they actually do a parade in front of the White House. And so it's interesting to see how we're starting to get accepted in very political places that we wouldn't have expected a few years ago. To me, though, I'm super interested in how the Burning Man civic experiment might be used elsewhere in the world. So I've personally been spending a lot of time in refugee camps over the last couple of years, because there are these new temporary municipalities that are happening where people are living in ways that we haven't seen before. And so when we look, this is Zatari over here on the left, which is a population of almost 500,000, and then you can see here Burning Man over here on the right. So these are the only 2 places in the world that I know of that look like each other. And so I'm super interested in how we might have learnings that are coming from Burning Man that could inform other temporary municipalities that are happening around the world. So one experiment that we did in 2016, I went to this camp in France called the Calais Jungle. I was building out this youth center with some volunteers, and I had this very interesting experience where the refugees kept on coming up to me and asking me for a hammer, a drill, a saw. And so I kind of had this aha moment of ignorance where I was like, oh, of course, these people are super skilled, and the one thing they don't bring with them as they smuggle themselves across the European continent is tools. So how could we create a project that gives people in remote places tools? So we came back and we built this project for Burning Man. We got a 20-foot container, and we got this truck, and then we filled it to the brim with all of these tools. CNC, laser cutter, electronics tools, wood tools, metal shop. And so we were able to prototype this out at Burning Man for the first time, hold workshops, and figure out how it worked. From that, we were invited to go out to Nepal, and we were able to build this makerspace off of the same model at a space called Communitaire Nepal. And so this was a really great model because this is the first time we got to go somewhere else and do it. And then last year, there were a whole bunch of major hurricanes that happened around the US. And so our community members in the US have decided to build their own. And so now we have 2 of these in Florida, and we have 1 of them in Texas, which are also iterations on this model. And so these are tool resources that volunteers are using to rebuild after natural disasters. And so to me, this is this very interesting experience where we can go out into the world and we can learn something. We can go to Burning Man and we can prototype something. And then once we share that model with the world, then other people are going to replicate it. And it's this circular learning model that to me is really the example of crowdsourced innovation. So thank you. This is my email if you want to be in touch, breedlove@burningman.org.
And questions. Вопросы. Только чур проходки не требовать, билеты.
It is about tickets, though, my question. So the tickets are pretty hard to get, as
Yes.
I'm sure you know.
Sure.
Is this on purpose, just because you kind of want to limit and you want people to, you really want the people that, you know, are worth going or work hard to go and just really kind of put an effort? Or is it just because you don't have the infrastructure to accommodate everyone?
Well, more we do this on federal land, and so we have to work with the United States government. And so we have a federal permit that only allows us to go up to 80,000 people. Right now we're working with the government to possibly scale it up, but right now we're kind of limited by what the government will allow us to do. I would say, though, if you're interested, there's actually a very big community of burners here in Moscow. You can find them on Facebook, Burning Man Russia. And being connected to your local community is one of the best ways to actually find a ticket.
Окей, спасибо. Еще вопросы? Вот молодой человек.
So what's the easiest way to become a volunteer? Yeah, I mean, you would go to the website. On our website, we have a whole volunteer form, and so you can sign up. You do still need to buy a ticket, yes. That is the thing, and it is kind of the hardest thing about Burning Man right now. But, you know, what I would also say is that while Burning Man in the desert is kind of the big one, you know, there are these other 86 events around that are happening around the world. And so Africa Burn in South Africa is very interesting. The 3rd biggest one is in Israel. It's called Midmurd. It's about 12,000 people. And so these are also interesting ways to get involved with the community. Sure, we actually give grants. We give about $1.2 million away for people to build art at Burning Man. And then we also have about $200,000 that we give out to artists out in the world to do art other places. So we fund big art both at Burning Man and in the world. You don't have to have a background, but you have to have a good idea. Say again. Safety? So we have teams of engineers that will help. And so, you know, depending on the size of your project, maybe these engineers will be volunteers, but there are also engineers who will do things for a very good rate because it's an art project. You have to say it one more time, sorry. They do, oh yeah, the federal government is definitely there. There are 4 different government agencies that are at the Burning Man event, but we work very closely with them to make this happen. You know, while the relationship is not always fun, it is a good relationship with the government because they're helping us do what we want to do, and we're trying to make sure that everybody's safe. Yeah?
Okay. The last question, please. Последний вопрос.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have you ever thought about going beyond the frame of temporary event and to build an actual city, a city of eternal freedom?
Very interesting question. You know, I mean, to me, that's actually one of the reasons I'm interested in working with refugee communities. I think that these are very interesting test beds. But I'll also say that 2 years ago, Burning Man bought 3,800 acres of a ranch in northern Nevada. And so that's our next big experiment. It's called Fly Ranch. And the idea is not necessarily to build a permanent city, but it is a place to build what a sustainable future might look like. And so we're imagining that it will be a retreat center, it'll be a place you can build big art, it'll be a place we can do educational things, and I think also really prototype things that we want to bring out to the world.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much,
Cool.
Christopher.
Thank you.